these modals, should, ought to, and had better, are the subject of today's lecture. This lecture will refer to chart 9.7 in your book, so if you'd like to turn to page 167 and follow along, you can. There will also be a short piece at the end about should have. Do you remember from the last lecture? In the last lecture on must not and have to and must in the negative, must not and don't have to, I suggested that you think of modals in two very broad categories. Do you remember what those categories were? That's right. They were rules and guessing about a situation. Remember, some modals are about rules. They express a rule, something that you don't have a choice. For example, you must not drive through a red light. I also suggested that some modals are about guessing about a situation, and we discussed it just a little bit, even though we won't be talking about these kind of modals until we get to chapter 10. But I introduced the idea that the word must can have two meanings. It can be a rule, like you must drive the speed limit, and it can also express guessing about a situation, like your eyes are red, you must be sad, or you must be tired. These are two meanings of the word must, two ways to use this modal. Must is kind of a special one because it belongs to really to two categories. The categories that we're discussing in general in Unit 9 are really just rules, and this third category, which I'm about to add, advice. Again, this category right here, guessing about a situation, we'll be talking about more in Unit 10. It's a little more complex. But for now, Chapter 9 is talking about, we've talked about rules, and now we're going to talk about advice, which is the third general category of modals. Modals that express advice, and now you can look at your book in page 167. Modals that express advice are should, ought to, and had better. Like all modals, you use them with just the modal verb plus the base verb, no to. And should and ought to, well, and ought to is special. To is built into the verb. You ought to study harder. So ought to, and I'll color that a different color so you can see it. Ought to is the modal. Study is the base verb. Just like should is the modal, study is the base verb. So don't be misled by the to in ought to. It's not important. It's just part of the modal. Should and ought to are pretty much the same thing. They both express advisability. You can use them kind of on a scale of strength. You can use them if this is a strong. Sorry for the handwriting. Strong, and this is weak. Okay. I think I'm going to switch to typing here. You could really say should and ought to are really kind of in the same area down here. Let's just highlight those so that you can see they're really kind of the same strength. They're both kind of weak suggestions, as it says in the description here. It can be just a suggestion all the way to a kind of a strong suggestion. And the way you make it negative, of course, is is like this. You shouldn't leave your keys in the car. Should not. Ought to would be negative. You ought not to leave your keys in the car. It's a little more formal. We don't use it as often. Mostly we use shouldn't. Now, pay attention to had better. Had better is a little different. Had better is very close to should and ought to, but it is stronger. Had better implies a warning or a threat of, or something bad is going to happen if you don't follow the advice. And had better, some things you should know about it. It has a present or future meaning. Present or future meaning. It's followed by the simple form of a verb, just like the others. It's got a base verb after it, and we really use it more in speaking than in writing. And if we want to make it negative, we just add not to the end. So you had better not plus the base verb. So had better is actually quite strong, and I'm just going to put that up here at the top of our scale. Had better implies something bad is going to happen if you don't follow the advice. So going back to the important points to remember, should and ought to express advisability, and they both kind of mean the same thing and have the same strength. Had better is stronger than the others, and it implies that something bad will happen if you don't follow the advice. Now you try. Test your knowledge of these verbs. Please do the exercises in this folder titled Exercise 19 and Exercise 23. Here is an extra little bit of information. If you'd like to turn the page to chart 9.8 on page 170. The past form of should. We know that should expresses advisability in the present form, but what about the past? The past is kind of special, okay? Should have has a special meaning. It's like giving advice about a past situation that you no longer can do anything about. So for example, let's think of this sentence. I am not happy with my grade. I should have studied harder for the test. Should have studied expresses a feeling of regret. You're looking back on the past and you wish you had done something differently. So it's like giving advice about a past situation that you no longer can do something about, so you feel regret. So going back to the chart 9.8 on page 170, you can see how do you use it? It should have plus the PP. We'll take a look at an example. I had a test this morning. I didn't do well on the test because I didn't study for it last night. I should have studied. Should have plus the PP studied. You were supposed to be here at 10 p.m., but you didn't come until midnight. We were worried about you. You should have called us. You didn't call. We wish you had called us. It's advice about the past. It's over. You can't do anything about it. We feel regretful. Again, it should have plus the PP. When you hear people say this word, it's going to sound like should have or shoulda. Don't be confused. It actually is a have. So don't think it's anything other than this. It sounds like shoulda or should have, but this is what people are actually saying. They're saying should have. It's very simple, and it's a very special form of should that is very useful for expressing past regrets or regrets about past situations. And that's all for this lecture. I will be talking about supposed to in the next one.